To save Pakistan's forests, all the stakeholders must work together. If we don't, deforestation will not only destroy the habitat for wildlife, but will leave nothing for the
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum. You're watching PTV World. I'm Fahim Bankish with the headline news for this hour. Prime Minister Imran Khan says no one sleeps hungry program is a step towards a welfare state which always cares for its poor and deserving people. Prime Minister Imran Khan reaffirms Pakistan's steadfast support to the Afghan peace process, stressing the importance of negotiated political solution. Election Commission issues victory notification of newly elected 48 senators. Commission dismisses petition seeking to stop notifications of success of Yusuf Raza Gilani and Faisal Wada. All educational institutions will remain closed in Islamabad, Peshawar and 7 cities of Punjab for 2 weeks due to high positivity ratio of COVID-19 cases. Vaccination of people of 60 years and older against COVID-19 begins as Pakistan reports 1,786 new COVID-19 cases and 43 deaths over the last 24 hours. Climate activists from Greenpeace lands a paraglider on top of the European Central Bank's press centre, hang a banner accusing the bank of funding polluters. Ronaldo and Juventus crash out of Champions League, losing to heavy underdog Porto in a wild, frantic, intense match in Turin. And Erling Haaland's 2 goals against Sevilla stands Borussia Dortmund to the Champions League quarter-finals. That's all for now. For further details and live streaming, do log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on our Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Thank you for joining us.
Islamabad, the capital city, bustles with politicians and business activity. It stretches out around the foothills of the Margalas. To many, Islamabad is just that, lush green views in a modern, urbanized capital that houses politicians, diplomats and the Pakistani elite. But it is while driving through the stucco gates that the line between urbanization and traditionalism blurs us into an eclectic blend of the past and the present. The alleyways that bend through the village hold remnants of a rather colorful, regal history. A tourist site today, the village was once a garden resort known for its natural springs. The historical significance of the city of Islamabad is unknown to many, and for this reason, the Capital Development Authority preserved Saidpur, a Mughal-era village located within the capital city. Through the periods of history that Saidpur has existed, it has been influenced by civilizations such as the Gandhara, Greek, Buddhist, Mughal, Ashoka and British colonialism. Saidpur village is said to be 300 years old, but the elders argue it is even older than most believe it to be. Saidpur's name originates from Sultan Said Khan. He was the son of the Ghakkar chief of the Potohar region during Mughal Emperor Babur's reign, Sultan Sarang Khan. The village was gifted by Sultan Said Khan to his daughter, who married the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, the son of Emperor Akbar.
मैं शांति से पैदा हुआ। इस गांव का नाम सैदपुर था। उससे पहले जो नाम था वो राजा सैद खान हमारा बड़का था। उसने इलाका फतह किया। उसने फतेहपुर बावली नाम था, गुरुद्वारा भी था, मस्जिद भी थी। हम लोगों के साथ एक दूसरे के साथ प्यार करते थे।
Later, the village was recognized as the pilgrimage site by the Hindu commander Raja Man Singh. In 2006, the CDA began remodeling project of the Saidpur village. The French government provided technical assistance in the remodeling procedure. The purpose of the preservation project was to give visitors a taste of the multicultural, multifaceted heritage of Pakistan. The initial cost of this cultural project at the time was estimated at 400 million rupees. French ambassador Régis de Bellonnet was very supportive of this initiative and invited French architect Max Bois-Robert. Bois-Robert gave his expertise to develop remodeling methods that would not only give the necessary modern upgrades, but also preserve the natural impact of the village. Extensive preservation work was done to restore historical sites such as the Hindu Mandir and Sikh Gurdwara. Mud houses were given an uplift to improve aesthetics. Workers toiled to conserve the traditional atmosphere by restoring stone walls and adding haystacks and horse-drawn carts. Today, Saidpur preserves the historical face of the Potohar region. Boasting old rural roots with a modern edge, Saidpur is a manifestation of the transition Pakistan is making in developing both economically and socially. Saidpur historically was a village settled by craftspeople. Today, the present generations have continued the legacy of their forefathers and kept their art alive in the form of handiwork.
ये जो बर्तन बनाने वाला काम है, मैं 10 साल का था उस वक्त काम शुरू किया है। इस वक्त मेरी 50 साल उम्र हो गई है यही काम करते करते। सैदपुर में 6 खानदान सारे यही गुजर गए काम करते करते। तो ये गांव इसी ट्रेन की वजह से मशहूर है। मिट्टी की ट्रेन जो बनी है ये 120 साल पुरानी है।
I think that it's amazing that they have restaurants here now, but they've still kept that, that original look, and the village is still there, and the people get to do something, contribute, just help the economy. I think it's great.
These doors, these windows are antique. They are rustic and beautiful.
The place is so beautiful, and according to architecture, according to designing, according to painting, all the people of Pakistan should visit this place.
Visitors can take in lush green views and pay visits to historical sites such as the Nomad Art Gallery, Old Sufi Tomb, the Hindu Temple and the Sikh Gurdwara. Many popular restaurants and cafes also line the entrance of the village to cater to the palate of visitors with tantalizing local cuisines sure to stimulate anybody's taste buds. Preservation projects such as these uphold our heritage and establish our footprint in history. These places are our cultural assets, and we should take pride in the richness of Pakistani history. Saidpur is a must-see for all Pakistanis and foreigners alike. The world over, many have spoken for Pakistan, but it is these voices that tell the true story of this beautiful country. It is these places that echo the tales untold. There is much to discover to capture the true face of Pakistan.
Hello and welcome to Politics. Today I'm Farrukh. We are talking about Pakistan's politics for past many days. We are going to continue that, especially because there are three dimensions which are emerging. One is Senate elections. There is hearing that we saw today as well, and there seems to be a lot of controversy regarding this issue because the government believes that it is not being given a fair opportunity to present its case to the Election Commission, and the Election Commission keeps on adding more hurdles to the government's point of view. This is the government's position. But then we have seen that there are two very heavyweight or influential candidates for Chairman Senate. Both keep on lobbying, and the number game so far, what we have heard, is neck and neck. We don't know which way it will go. There is one aspect which is important: institutions, and then of course also the election process. The second aspect is regarding Punjab, where we kept on hearing about a possible change. Yesterday the speculation continued, and there are pundits who believe, and pundits have actually become very vocal on the matter. Many believe that it was a missed opportunity not changing the Chief Minister of Punjab, because there are people who believe that there are limits to what is being delivered in Punjab. The third thing, and that is quite interesting, is NA 75 Daska, where a by-election had to take place this month. It has been postponed till the next. So these are three very interesting dimensions. But remember that while the election goes on in both sides, Daska as well and the Senate, the pressure on the pressure because of politics on the institutions like Election Commission, then many are going to the courts as well, seems to actually create a very interesting environment. If you remember 2014, 2016, 2018, continuously this narrative where everybody is combative actually creates a kind of pressure on institutions that seems to make things ungovernable. So is it what we are heading to? This is also a very important question that one has to take stock of. We are going to talk about all these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Barrister Safiullah Khori, a legal expert, also is associated with a political party, but once again, because it is not a party that takes part in the elections, I'm not going to actually introduce that bit. Thank you very much, Safi, for being part of the program. Javed Jadoon Saab, senior analyst, senior journalist, one of the patrons of this program, also joins us. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Barrister Asad Rahim joins us on Skype. I'm not sure whether he has connected. He has. I can see him. Thank you very much, Barrister Asad Rahim, for being part of the program. He is not only an accomplished lawyer, but also a columnist, an anchor, and whatnot. Once again, thank you very much. I'm told that we will be joined by PTI's representation on telephone later in the program. The moment he joins us, I'm going to introduce him as well. Barrister Safiullah Ghori, let me start with you. And let me ask you about the quality of discourse that is going on around the Senate elections. Do you think that it is creating more hurdles than solutions?
Tafi Saab, I don't really see any problems with the kind of discourse that's taking place at the moment, because this is very standard discourse. Elections have taken place.
Everyone is a cheater but me.
For a lot of people, yes, and that's what they keep saying. That's what they keep emphasizing on. But when it comes to the issue of the Chairman Senate elections, we have, like you mentioned, a very strong neck-to-neck competition. And this is where things get really interesting, because now we'll really see if the government can pull off a magic trick like the opposition did when it came to the elections of Gulani versus their candidate. Now, at the moment, Hafiz Sheikh. Now, at the moment,
last time you had objection on the finance minister. Today, you even forgot his name.
That's just kind of performance he's been giving. It doesn't really leave much to stick to your memory. But regardless, I think, at the moment, we all know that the opposition has a lead of 6 seats, and technically 5 seats, because Sadar is not in the country. He's out of the country, and so. In a proper world, the opposition ought to win, and Gilani should replace Anjrani. But what we're seeing is very interesting. I recently came to know.
You realize that there is no chance whatsoever that you are going to mention Ishaq Dar, and I'm not going to ask you what miracle actually ensures that he sits. He has a seat in the Senate, despite not having taken any oath, being a proclaimed offender.
I am as baffled as you are, because this is a matter for the Election Commission to decide. The petition is pending with the Election Commission for a very long time. I have no idea why the Election Commission has taken forever. He should be de-seated immediately. This is, like you mentioned, he hasn't even taken the oath yet. So why is the person still being considered a senator? And this is a loss for the opposition. They should.
He's perhaps not being considered a senator. The only thing he has done is actually put a curse like Lord Voldemort on the seat that he occupies. Nobody else can set it.
That's a very good example.
Right?
So regardless, what we have right now is a good competition. But what's particularly interesting to me was the statement by Pervez Khattak recently, who said that they would want to field Maulana Ghafoor Hazri as their candidate for the Deputy Prime Minister.
Whereas Deputy Prime Minister.
Deputy Chairman Senate. And so
that move was rejected.
Yes, of course it was rejected. But what I think about the move is that it's particularly interesting, because on the one hand, Fazl Rahman is leading the opposition and PDM in many ways, and then we have somebody from JUIF being.
Thank you very much for actually highlighting all the issues that I want to discuss. Let me go to Javed Jadun Sahab. Javed Jadun Sahab, here's the astounding thing. I mean, the government says that the opposition majority in the chamber, that is Senate, is not sacrosanct, because there are many small parties that come together to form the opposition. And this is invariably the response we get from the PDM as well, that the government's alliance or numbers are not sacrosanct either. So who is going to actually become the chairman Senate?
Thank you very much, Farrukh. I think extremely important question. For me, it seems that there's a political brinkmanship which is being pushed to the limits from both sides, the ruling alliance and the opposition, combined opposition as well. Politics, more of a politics of rhetoric than politics of political dogmas. And I believe that the ideological division has become so blurred between the opposing camps that it is extremely difficult for the people of Pakistan to understand which direction to look for as far as salvation is concerned, the country's salvation is concerned, in terms of people's economic hardships and so many other.
So do you really expect salvation from any one party?
No. For salvation from the system, the system which has been unable to deliver as far as the people's problems are concerned, and of course, I think they look towards the political leadership for a mature politics. What is happening right out in the arena is basically the politics of acrimony and the politics of confrontation, and even now I see. After the statement issued by, rather the statement made by the information minister in a talk show that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf would go to any extent to make it possible for their candidate to win.
Because it is not getting a fair opportunity. Now it is gloves are off.
Yes, for whatever reason, because the youth of Pakistan, which always believed that there is a shining path as far as Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is concerned. They were sick and tired of the VIP culture in Pakistan. They were sick and tired of the corruption at the highest tiers of the society and the governance. And they started looking towards Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf as a party, which was a different political party and with certain moral political standing as well. But once you start talking about the same kind of a rhetoric or same kind of a political scheming to make it possible to win the chairmanship, then it goes down.
But here's the problem. PTI government is an elected government. It is not a dictatorship, right? They didn't impose martial law. They didn't break or suspend the constitution. There is so much wiggle room for them to actually work. And in order to do that, they'll have to, make their hands dirty. Actually, if they cannot dirty their hands, and if they are not going to work with the system, will it not become impossible to govern this country?
For the government, I think it is their responsibility to change the system, not become part of the system which they have been condemning and criticizing in the past. They came into power on the basis of their slogans of clean politics, politics without corruption, and good governance and reforms at every tier of the governance as well. We have seen little reforms in the past 2.5 years, and I don't personally believe that doing the same dirty politics, I'm sorry using this word, but as the people of Pakistan have seen in the past, the two main political parties now which are in the opposition, what they did in the last 3 decades, I think it is part of the history. So why become part of the same political culture which they have been condemning and criticizing?
Yeah, but you'll have to actually identify the magic wand they'll need to actually change everything. But I must also compliment you. You'll notice that I didn't stop you a lot.
Thank you very much.
And I tell you why. I have to give you this compliment that the question was about who is going to win. You didn't give me the answer. And I think that was smart thing.
Extremely difficult question.
Yeah, I know. That was a smart question to answer. But let me go to Asad Rahim. Asad, you must be following what is going on right now in the Election Commission. You must be privy to the debate that is going on national media, and also in the honorable courts. Do you think that when it comes to the Election Commission, its conduct is really become controversial, or it is not?
Thank you for having me, Farrukh Saab. I don't think what the Election Commission has done has been extraordinary so far. It is a constitutional body, it is independent, it is autonomous, and it needs to be if it is to actually distinguish itself as a neutral arbiter over the skullduggery of political parties on a day-to-day basis. Having said that, you will see that although the ECP very clearly said that they could not de-seat Mr. Gilani, or rather they could not stop his notification, they also made the same ruling for Faisal Wavda. And this is because they have to make a more thorough finding as to whether or not pre-poll rigging or any other sort of rigging or vote wastage, which we discussed previously on your show, and very kind of you to have me on that one as well, has taken place or not. Now, the PTI narrative is that, well, isn't there a clear distinction in what they're doing in Daska and how efficient they were and how charged up they were as opposed to what they've done with Mr. Gilani? And I would say there is a distinction to be made. And while I can understand PTI partisan sentiment, the distinction is that the process with regards to the Daska polling itself, with presiding officers going left, right and center, the phones being switched off, etc., caused a lot of concern to the point that the government itself conceded that they would open 20 polling stations. With regards to Mr. Gilani, now they need to delve further into a video that Mr. Gilani's son himself has admitted, and then see what material consequence that has on the election. In my very personal opinion, it certainly has a material consequence, but as with Mr. Wavda, as with Mr. Gilani's son, the ECP has to pronounce an authoritative finding first.
Right. Regarding these aspects that you pointed out in video, I'm sure that you have listened to what the Election Commission had to say. In the video, they want people to identify who actually appears in the video, right? And there is another very interesting aspect, that is Mariam Nawaz actually speaking to the audience and telling them that it was not money that worked, it was the matter of tickets being offered. And that, if I'm not wrong, somehow makes some kind of violation of the rules. And yet, we haven't heard that kind of, initiative coming from the Election Commission of Pakistan. You're right about Faisal Bada. But again, to a common man, Faisal Bada is also one of the rich guys who actually got his way. Is it not true?
Well, I think what Ms. Mariam Nawaz said, as Ehtizaz Ehsan Saab, who is affiliated with a party that is in an alliance with PML and has already said as a senior constitutional lawyer that what Ms. Mariam Nawaz said was tantamount to inducement. And it was inducement of other PTI members. I think it would be very hard to come up with a different interpretation. But what I will say is that you don't even need to go that far, Farrukh Saab. If any layperson has listened to the second video of Mr. Ali Adar Gilani, who is saying things like 50 million, 100 million development funds, Nasir Shah will be there, do you have anybody in Karachi who can receive funds from there? Only MQM has a rate that is higher than us. It vindicates the PTI narrative that Senate seats are actually bought and sold the way one would buy and sell tomatoes in bazaar. It was a very, very sad day for the senior Pakistan People's Party leadership. And I still think, though, that the Election Commission of Pakistan has not done anything extraordinary. It needs to pronounce an authoritative finding, and that finding is informed by the Supreme Court's declaration in Justice Arshad Malik's case, Judge Arshad Malik's case, in which they have laid down an entire list of handling protocols for video to be used as evidence or admissibility. Barrister Ghori would probably know more than I. But with these declarations in field, the ECP now has to apply its mind, and the government and the opposition should now just wait. And without dragging the ECP, which, as we mentioned before, as an autonomous body, into the conversation, they should let them apply their mind and come up with a decision that serves the ends of justice.
Right. You want to actually talk about Judge Arshad Malik case and the findings?
Sure, but I think more interesting than the Judge Arshad Malik case, I'll just bring up the more recent case regarding a video evidence, that is the unfortunate crushing of a poor man in Rawalpindi and the CCTV footage thereof.
Rawalpindi or Quetta?
Rawalpindi, which there was a court judgment yesterday in which a young man who was the son of an army officer crushed over a person and crushed him again, and it was a very viral video. It was very popular. So this matter went to the court. In the magistrate court, this person was given life sentence, and now the session court has acquitted him. because they say that the video evidence is not conclusive. And so this is very important, because yesterday's acquittal has raised a lot of issues as far as legal circles are concerned as to what constitutes proper video evidence. Qanun-e-Shahadat under Article 164 mentions that evidence can be presented when it's taken by modern devices. So, video evidence is admissible, and Judge Asad Malik's case and several other cases along those lines have allowed the courts to start entertaining a greater degree of video evidence. But what we clearly can see now, especially with yesterday's acquittal, is that the courts are still very handicapped. Now, what I see with Gilani's tape and the nexus that I see with, for instance, the case that has just taken place in Rawalpindi, is the fact that they say that figures were not easily identifiable with the eye. And even though Gilani himself is a singular person who is admitting to it, the other people who were there, I don't know if you can identify who everybody was.
No,
if you can, if you can, if but the video itself is clear enough to see.
But here's the concern. The election commission seems to have made its mind that it cannot proceed further till the time everyone pictured in the video, whether they are pictured or they are there, they are not identified.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So this is something that the Session Court of Rawalpindi held yesterday. And so this is exactly what created this entire problem. That so unfortunately we have I've mentioned many times on this show that our CRPC and various PPC and our various laws are archaic. They're very old and they do not cater to the modern developments in technology. And so even though at the moment I feel that we need to proceed with this very, very carefully, because there is this whole host of deep fakes that are coming along, and deep fakes are stunning.
But here's the problem. I don't care about the video any longer. When you have appeared in the video and then you come on national television and say that it was I,
so there is a
sitting.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Maryam Nawaz's case also, when she says, and she's confessing actually, that inducement is there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Gilani himself admitting, but this appears to be more of an issue of abetting some sort of tampering and some sort of election
destroying the
ballot papers, and so
which is a crime.
Yes, which is a crime. But the problem here is that because Ali Gilani is there inducing some people, we need to find out who those people were. He can't be inducing the air.
So you honestly cannot see the parallel. The parallel the government side or PTI side is actually trying to draw between Daska and this one, where on one side the election commission really took initiative.
So, as far as Daska is concerned, I think Daska was a different case because of the violence that took place, because of the fact that people disappeared, there were kidnappings, there was
alleged,
but even so, these are very serious crimes, and people disappearing, proper bullets being fired, and just the general lawlessness in the entire area. So I do feel that the election commission, being traditional as it is, would think of that as a much greater issue than the latter case of Gilani. But I personally agree that the law needs to be amended to try and
who's going to bell the cat? Who's going to amend the law?
Obviously, the government.
They don't have the members.
But they need to float a bill anyways. I don't see what stops them from trying to change the system. Their job is to float bills. It's not their job to predict what will happen when the bill gets to the parliament.
Right. Jadoon Saab, you can comment on anything and everything that was said. And then I have to, because you are the analyst in this program, so I will once again ask you, who do you think is going to win? I'm going to ask them both as well.
Winning, as far as the numbers game is concerned, Farrukh, I think the possibility is that the opposition should win. But as the situation has become quite confusing, with claims and counterclaims of achieving the magic number, even the government says that they are comfortable now, and they have got the required number of senators to elect Mrs. Sinjarani as the next chairman. And given the situation, even the last episode when the elections took place for Islamabad Senate seat, almost every political commentator was talking about the comfortable win for the finance minister. But ultimately, results were, on the contrary, quite shocking. Even in the chairman Senate selection, I think it would be extremely hard to predict. It could go either way. well, because government has the probably the kind of advantage which every government does, and so far the statements coming from the from the ministers are concerned, I think they seem to be very confident that they are able to win.
Yeah, but you and I were not saying that one candidate is going to win. We were asking questions that day as well, if you remember.
Yes.
Because as student of history and politics, basically our job is to ask more questions rather than provide answers because they are policy makers. But here's the point. Let us focus on the numbers. We are told that PDM has 53 senators, and the government side has 47. But one of them is a retired head, that is Ishaq Dar, who cannot come to the country.
Right.
The other person is Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami has declared that it is not going to, vote for. ANP in Balochistan has one seat. And ANP in Balochistan is local ally of BAP, Balochistan Awami Party.
Right.
And the chairman Senate actually comes from that area. You see the numbers actually coming closer and closer. And then there is this discrepancy in JUIF also. That, of course, the name was nominated of the Rafur Hadri, but with due respect, when you look at the dynamic, the Balochistan chapter is more powerful because it gets more seats. And that Balochistan chapter is not big fan of Maulana Fazlur Rahman's politics. So that also becomes...
Yes, I agree with you. I think that was a very, very smart move on part of the government to offer deputy chairmanship to Jamiat Ulama-e-Islam, because if we see government not nominating any candidate from their ranks against Mr. Hadri, then I think people would start believing that there was some kind of understanding between the government and Mr. Hadri, and I think then it becomes quite comfortable for the government to win the chairmanship. Okay. And I see that happening. I see that happening, that government might not nominate. I'm not sure about that, but it looks that if government goes for not nominating anyone from their own ranks to be pitted against Mr. Hadri, then I think the game is probably set in favor of the government, PTI government.
Okay.
But one thing I would like to add...
Yeah, but here's the astounding part. And with due respect, I'm stopping you here just to point out that last time when the incumbent chairman Senate was elected, People's Party had sacrificed its chairmanship position, and they settled for deputy or vice chairman. And now it seems that between the three parties which have bigger number than any, the religious political party seems to be gaining more ground. Is it not a moment to reflect for the three secular parties which are there, that you are ceding more ground to the religious lobby?
Yes, Farrukh, I agree with you. But right now, I think they are so blinded because of the political confrontation they face right now. And I totally agree that it is about time that they should realize that giving space to the religious political parties would be at the cost of the liberal, progressive and democratic forces in Pakistan. I'm not saying that religious parties are not democratic, but the kind of a rhetoric they are propounding is probably goes against certain principles of the democratic polity in Pakistan. And Pakistan People's Party, rightly so, has offered so many sacrifices. And same is the case with Pakistan Muslim League N, which claims to be a middle of the neither right nor the left side of the political divide, but in the middle of the political divide. So I think it is opportunism, nothing else. I don't see anything else, because they believe that somehow or the other they would like to put the government on the mat, they would like to win the chairmanship of the Senate chairman at the cost of their own political principles as well.
But chairman Senate is not the last thing on the map, right? Then they are going to head to Punjab, and they are going to bring down the government there, and then they will again invariably try to bring down the prime minister.
Yes, I think this is part of the series of events which are going to take place in the future as well. So I think they don't believe anymore in political wisdom or in political insight. They're going the whole hog, and they're trying to put each other on the map at the cost of the political principle.
And that is quite an interesting point. Let me go back to Barrister Asad Rahim, you're listening to the participants, and I'm sure that you have studied the party politics in this country very closely as well. Now, the problem is that these three parties, which regardless of the rhetoric they use, they are secular political parties, they seem to actually keep on fighting. And while they do, last time in 2018, when they were fighting among themselves, TLP actually gained a lot of ground in Punjab and Karachi. This time also, it seems that PDM now has the face of PDM is not Maryam Nawaz, not Bilal Bhutto Zardari, it is Maulana Fazlur Rahman. Do these political parties actually not undermine their own interest by ceding so much ground to the religious political class, and while doing so undermine their own long-term strategies, sir?
It's a very interesting question. Yes, I think that's a very interesting question. Firstly, I don't think any of these parties are secular whatsoever.
Okay.
Cultural decay. PMLN is lowest common denominator capitalism, and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is inherently confused as to where it sits on the spectrum. To call them secular or progressive parties when they really are just on the same sliding scale of conservatism to centrism might be getting away from what these parties have actually defined themselves to be. Are the PDM parties beholden to Maulana Fazlur Rahman? This is correct. That's also because Maulana Fazlur Rahman is perhaps the savviest politician in this country and has also perhaps contributed the very least to the progress of its people. So that's an interesting combination to have. As far as his own political acuity is concerned, he has been able to resurrect himself from complete oblivion that his party faced in 2018 and is now the most undeservedly focal figure of PDM, which speaks to Mr. Bhutto Zardari's and Ms. Maryam Nawaz Sahiba's inexperience rather than Maulana Fazlur Rahman's genius, which he undoubtedly is. The third thing, sir, that you brought up, that's the TLP. The TLP does not get votes on the basis of religion. The TLP gets votes on the basis of class. The people who vote for the TLP in Punjab and Karachi are the most deprived segments of our society. And when they listen to Mr. Rizvi, and now they get to listen to his son, something actually bursts forward in them that yes, this is a decaying elite. They haven't given us anything. They haven't provided basic service delivery. And it is a very disturbing trend. So I think unless you actually focus on big ticket projects, unless you actually improve people's standard of living, it won't matter if the political parties keep conceding to the religious right. We will see an organic resurgence of these parties. And I think the future, when that happens, is in front of us.
Right. But since you were talking about who votes for TLP, actually I recall my own experience when I went to various shops and merchants. Most of them were actually voting for TLP. There seems to be some kind of connection between the trading class and the religious elite. And one question that actually kept on coming back to me, I recall after 2013 elections, there was a very interesting point made by Ijaz Shafiq Gitlani, who said that there is a middle class, a new middle class that is emerging, which doesn't have any kind of voice in politics. And if any of these parties actually doesn't actually include them, then they are going to go for the religious parties, because all three parties seem to have one consensus point, that they are not actually seriously pushing for local body elections. Do you think that that might actually cause more problem rather than solution, rather than the decisions they are taking between PDM and the PTI?
Absolutely. I think that's a very thoughtful observation. I think there was a political project that was started by the Zia regime, and it culminated in 1985 with the partyless elections that created an entirely different constituency and tore away Pakistan People's Party's vote bank. It focused on the urban middle classes, traders, industrialists, and the poster child for that was Mian Nawaz Sharif Saab. it is a failure of Pakistan Muslim League N to be losing out on that core electorate all over again. And that direct link that you referred to between trader, between religious right, and between the urban middle classes remains as vital, and they don't have that voice. And that goes back to what you yourself said, Farrukh Saab. In fact, as you were proceeding with your question, I thought that my answer would be redundant. It is so important and so vital that we have local governments in this country. They are in a state of dysfunction in 3 provinces, and they've been entirely emasculated in the 4th, which is sin. Once you create local governments, you will also create an entirely new class of political representatives. And that is where these people will find their voice. That is where these people will not have to go to the MNA for sewerage and a new roof on the mosque and a new street. Those people can then actually discuss the high business of legislation. And I think that goes back to what Mr. Wari and Mr. Jadoon said in the earlier part of this program, that this government actually needs to focus on the business of transformation, on the business of reform, on the business of legislation, like local governments.
Right. Let me ask you the same question. The fight between these parties, he doesn't agree that they are secular, but religious parties don't own these 3 parties. They think that they are secular, right? And I think they are the closest to how we function in this society. Religious, but not actually wearing religion on our sleeves. At this moment, do you think that these parties are going to gain more ground if we have such kind of confrontation? I ask this because this country still is fighting terrorism, religious radicalism, and there seems to be some kind of disconnect between the imagination of these parties and what is happening, that they might end up rewarding the very people that are after their base.
Yeah, I think here I would really say that I agree 100% with what Barrister Asad Rahimi said a while ago. I do not see this necessarily as a religious and secular divide. I think this is in fact a class divide, and I do believe very strongly that parties like TLP came about solely because they put forward the Islamic ideas of equality between the classes, and that's in my opinion the real reason why TLP was so popular, because you had, and it still is, but what we had with TLP was an abolishing of the classism within the political party. So for instance, we see in all of these bigger political parties, PTI, in PMLN and People's Party, we see that even the difference between the party workers and the leaders is immense. I cannot imagine any average nominal party worker going up and meeting the party leader straight on in any sort of setting. They'd probably have to go through a massive chain of command where they'd report to a hierarchy, and that hierarchy would eventually deliver some sort of a message.
I get that, but here's the problem. You refuse to see this religious secular divide. But my question, and I'm later going to go to Jadoon Saab, is how many religious parties will allow women to actually be the faces of party, right? People's Party allowed one.
Yes.
PMLN is now allowing one, and that doesn't seem to be a possibility with any religious party. And that is
I absolutely agree. We have not seen women emerge per se in any radical religious party as yet, but we do have women-centric groups that are extremely religious, that work as wings of these religious
I go to Jadoon Saab, think of any member of TLP, any female member of TLP who might be its leader next time that we talk. Jadoon Saab, you want to actually come in on these matters?
Are you talking about whether
the political parties undermining their own stock by fighting among themselves, and while they do so, they end up undermining institutions also, because the secular institutions that stand, whether they are secular or not, is a different debate, but they are national institutions. So much pressure is exerted that they become ungovernable as well.
I think the one part of your question, I would like to agree that they are definitely undermining Pakistan's political system by going the whole hog and pushing to the limits their confrontation. They are like gladiators, and they're not fighting it out like politicians, because politics is art of possible, and they are not making it possible. They are not willing to sit together and negotiate their differences or whatever political contents they have right now to clash with each other. More responsibility lies with the ruling Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, because they have more stakes in the system rather than the two main opposition parties, including Pakistan People's Party and PMLN. And the second part of your question, whether they are creating a space for religious forces, I think I would like to agree with this notion that Pakistani society is more divided on the basis of socio-economic differences rather than religious. Because if it was on the basis of religion, I think Jamaat Islami stood better chance to win the people of Pakistan, because they are very disciplined, they are very, their cadres are very indoctrinated.
But is it not a proof that they don't have the constituency, and when you fight, you create a space that actually is captured by them? Next time they may get more seats.
Farrukh, but that space is not being created for the political, for the religious political parties, but the space is being created for those who are talking about safeguarding the interests of the downtrodden in Pakistan. So if you look at the following, the particular following of the TLP, South Punjab is their bastion, and we understand that South Punjab is probably lagging behind in so many economic indicators, and they have been complaining about lopsided development in Punjab and most of the funds being spent on central and northern Punjab. So I think on that particular, on the basis of those particular concerns and complaints, they were talking about creation of a new province for them where their interests, economic, political interests are represented properly.
Right, but with due respect, central Punjab, the vote share of TLP increases there. It becomes third party to get highest numbers. The People's Party comes fourth or fifth. That was shocking to me. Go to interior Sindh, vote share actually rockets further. And you look at Karachi, there too. My humble submission is we can actually talk about both the classes and the religious divide, because there are people who want to actually impose their version of Sharia in the country, right? You have to agree to this reality.
I think for me it is more of disenchantment with the current political dispensation and the political democratic project in Pakistan. People have started looking towards other sources of inspiration. I think that is quite dangerous for Pakistan's political system.
But that was happening even in 1947. With due respect, it is nothing new. I mean,
but I think now we are in the 21st century, and the political dynamics have changed so much since that they have become more dangerous. Because the whole world is divided now.
I'm told that we are left with a couple of minutes. Let me ask you to conclude for our benefit. I wanted it to be more superficial discussion. We wanted to talk about, or at least I wanted to, who is going to be the winner, who is going to actually benefit, right? And what becomes of an election commission. But I'm glad that we talked about deeper issues here. Javed Jadul sir, your conclusion, sir.
I think a very short conclusion. It is about time that the both political camps, they should realize that they are doing politics at the expense of the people of Pakistan. The examples they are setting are, I think, not very shining examples, and they need to look inward, and they need to decide whether they would like to continue with the same posturing and same rhetoric, or they would like to sit together and find solutions.
They are never going to sit together. But let me ask Asad Taim, your conclusion, sir.
This government has 2.5 years left. They need to get into the business of transformational reform and let the ECP do its job. The second is that religious parties like the TLP are fulfilling a supply and demand issue. The most popular demand in this country is the law of God. And mainstream parties need to understand that and try to figure out what they need to do of their own accord. The third, sir, you raised a very interesting question that if certain religious parties show up, then what is to happen to their female representation? Sir, even in the mainstream parties, female leadership only emerged as a function of necessity, because Murtaza Bhutto was hijacking airplanes and Hassan and Hussain did not want to lead their own party. So we actually need a more holistic approach towards female representation taking on party leadership beyond dynasty. So those are
I
three quick
totally get
conclusions.
that, sir. I'm told that we have run out of time. If you have half a sentence you can add, then I have to conclude.
Back to local government systems, please.
Thank you very much. Let us hope that happens, because you have listened to our participants. While I conclude, let me thank all the three guests who have joined. It is always heartening to listen to their thought process. But regarding what is happening right now, it seems that this politicization and this polarization in the society actually is going to create an environment where nobody benefits. Nobody can say that their interests are safe and secure, and perhaps that the only exception perhaps might be people with interest, like corrupt people, mafias, and then of course the lobby that we have never understood to work with, that is the religious lobby. But at this moment it seems that these political parties are not open to this argument, and that should worry us all. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.
The Ubia National Park is located in the lush hills of the Galiat forests that stretch from near Islamabad to Abbottabad and through to Azad Kashmir. It is a sanctuary traditionally known for its spectacular scenery and its unspoiled, peaceful surroundings. But in the last few decades, that has changed. Every year, more than 120,000 tourists visit the park in the summer season. The area has become increasingly popular and is now bustling with traffic and large-scale development. Where there were trees and streams, there are now hotels and shops. The fumes emitted from vehicles affects not only trees and plant life, but also the wild animals that live in the forest. The large number of hotels, summer houses and restaurants brings its own set of problems. The careless disposal of waste by these hotels and restaurants threatens the fragile ecosystem of the park. Garbage and contaminated streams are to be found all along the once pristine trekking routes. This solid waste and contaminated water has become a serious threat to the environment. Much of it is non-biodegradable, and the rest decomposes at a particularly slow rate due to the cold climate. The garbage can harm the animals of the forest too, as they forage for food. Where there were once streams of crystal clear water, There are now rivers of garbage. The polluted water affects communities downstream who have to go further from home every day to find clean water. Waterborne diseases force the local people to spend money on medical care, which they can hardly afford. All this pollution contributes daily to the degradation of the forest, and the eubia is under threat. Both visitors and local communities need to be aware of the harm the waste and pollution is causing. The lack of proper waste management